Welcome to Try Talking Sport, hosted by me, Joanne Murphy. Thank you for tuning into the show. Whether you are an athlete, adventurer or endurance enthusiast, you've come to the right place to be inspired, encouraged, motivated and entertained by the sporting endeavours of our guests. If you tuned into our most recent episode featuring Graham Mackin, or have been keeping an eye on my social pages, you will know that we are conducting some research to find out a little bit about you, the listener, where you are tuning in from, what you enjoy and what you would like to hear in the future. Pop over to www.trytalkingsport.com to complete our survey and you could be in with a chance to win one of our pretty cool bobble beanie hats. It's really hard to believe we are into the final week of February. This year is flying by so quickly already. If you haven't set yourself some goals or race plans for this year, or maybe you've fallen off the wagon with your fitness goals and plans, this is a great time to reset and refocus. The start of a new month bringing with it lots of opportunities to chase some goals, coupled with a renewed energy for being outdoors, once the weather improves, of course. It's a great incentive to get moving with those fitness and racing goals for 2020. Speaking of big goals, in this episode I chat with Donnacha McCarthy from Drimoleague in West Cork, who is chasing the Olympic dream to represent Ireland in paratriathlon in the PTVI category. Donnacha is the National Paratri Champion and Paratriathlete of the Year. Donnacha is a quiet, softly spoken athlete, but don't let that fool you. His focus, determination, passion, and commitment to his sport is loud and clear and very inspiring. At the age of 6, Donnacha was diagnosed with cancer. He relapsed at the age of 10 and as a result of his illness became visually impaired. But he didn't let that stop his interest in sport. And he has previously captained the Irish team in blind football 5-a-side with Vision Sport Ireland at the 2017 European Qualifiers and European Challenge Cup. Donnacha has adapted to life with a visual impairment and is passionately pursuing his sporting goals. Although he only took up triathlon in 2017 and couldn't swim, he is now well on the road to Olympic qualification for Tokyo with the support of a number of guides and the paratriathlon team at Triathlon Ireland, headed up by Eamon Tilley. We are also joined in this episode by brothers Eamon and Dave Tilley, who give us an insight into the role of a guide with the Paratri team and some snippets of insight into the history of triathlon in Ireland. Mark O'Dwyer also joins us, hosting the episode in his offices of the Big Red Cloud in Dublin. He is one of Donnacha's proud sponsors, like the rest of us, inspired by Donnacha's resilience, determination and success to date. Enjoy the show. Donnacha McCarthy, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today. I believe you were swimming bright and early this morning.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me on the podcast. It's a pleasure. So I was swimming earlier this morning, so it was a 5:30 a.m. start for me, so that's generally one of my typical days. So usually I'm up at that time for training before heading into work then and going through my normal day.
Donnacha, you're an elite para-triathlete.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
I'm a paratriathlete. So at the moment I'm competing on the ITU circuit for Ireland. So I've been a triathlete, I suppose, since 2017, and I've been racing internationally since 2018. So I compete in the PTVI category, so that's the category for athletes with a vision impairment. And hopefully now I'm in the middle of qualification to looking at Tokyo in August.
So Donnacha, you haven't always been visually impaired. I believe you were sick as a child and as a result of the cancer and the treatment, you became blind.
Yeah, so I'm 29 now. I lost my sight when I was 10, so back in 2001. At the time, how it manifested itself, I suppose I would have been quite active as a kid. I played Gaelic with my local GA club. I suppose it was actually around this time of year. So we're just getting back into our pre-season training. And it was my coach actually kind of noticed it. So I actually wasn't catching balls or fumbling balls that I normally wouldn't have any issue with. So he said that, are you having any issues with your vision? Or is everything all right? And obviously I was only 10 at the time, and I was like, yeah, everything's fine. And it actually progressed very quickly from that point on. I suppose over the next couple of weeks, I just noticed in school, I was struggling to see the blackboard in school. On the paper, when I was doing my homework and stuff like that, all my writing and stuff was very blurry, and went home and said it to my parents, and I said, look, I think there's something wrong here. At the time, we just assumed it was just that I needed glasses, so one of my sisters had glasses as well, so we just thought, so nothing run-of-the-mill stuff here, so scheduled an appointment for CUH, so the University Hospital in Cork, and 2 days later travelled up to get an eye test done. In the space of that 2 days, my eyesight had steadily worsened to the state where when I actually went for my eye test, I couldn't see anything on the actual eye chart the doctor was holding, and basically keep coming closer and closer until she was about maybe a metre away, and I could just make out the top letter on the board, and that was it. So they were like, okay, there's something seriously wrong here. So I just was straight in for an eye scan, or for an MRI scan, and basically from that point on then they realised that it was cancer, and I was just put straight in for chemotherapy and radiotherapy treatment, and subsequently over the space of maybe 3 or 4 weeks lost my sight completely.
So Donnacha, how did that impact your life at such a young age, to go from quite an active young lad to the situation where you were going through a cancer treatment, but also resulting in visual impairment?
Yeah, it was obviously very tough, but I think because I was so young, I think children are amazingly resilient and just get the head down, get on with things a lot of the time. And I think I was quite lucky from that point of view, because obviously, I'd lost my sight, I was going through chemotherapy and radiotherapy treatment, all that, but I didn't really understand what the wider impact of going blind meant. I think it hit my parents and my family a lot harder than it actually hit me at the time, because obviously they were looking at the bigger picture. They're saying, oh God, how's he going to go to school, how's he going to go to college, get a job, all this kind of stuff, whereas I didn't think of that at all. I was just thinking about getting through the treatment, and I just wanted to get back to school and back playing football and back with my friends and stuff like that. Obviously I had a lot of help as well from organisations here in Ireland. So the Irish Guide Dogs for the Blind were absolutely brilliant with me. So were the National Council for the Blind. So they actually had a resource worker working with me, and what she really told me was that my life, it doesn't have to be hugely different. It's just we have to think of different ways of actually getting through this and doing your day-to-day tasks. So getting around the house, eating your dinner, going to school, what can we do to make your schoolwork easier? So it was all that kind of stuff, and it was all about kind of establishing a normal routine for me as quickly as possible again. So those two organisations helped immensely with that.
And I believe you have represented Ireland. You were with Vision Ireland at one point, and you captained the Irish team for the Euro qualifiers and Euro Championships. Yeah,
that's true. So I suppose football was one of the sports. Obviously, it was what I played when I was a kid, and it was something I loved. So I suppose I was introduced to visually impaired sport once I went to college, and that was through Vision Sports Ireland. They're holding a training camp for blind football, so it's football sub-5 aside. It's also a Paralympic sport. I didn't have a clue what it was at the time and didn't know how it worked, but I was like, I'll give this a go and see what it's like. So how the sport is played, so it has the ball has ball bearings in it, so it makes noise as it moves around the pitch, and all the outfield players are completely blind or blindfolded, and then the goalkeepers are actually sighted, and you have your coaches who give instruction to you on the pitch. And I absolutely loved it. It was brilliant. There's obviously a few bashes and clatters and stuff like that, but I think it kind of rediscovered my love for sport and love for getting out there and being active again. And obviously, we started off purely recreational, so that was around 2012, and to the testament of Vision Sports Ireland, they put in a huge amount of work, and as well as the FAI Football for All programme had a team of coaches who kind of worked with the team and brought us up through the levels during the years. And then obviously we ended up competing in the European qualifiers, in Romania in 2017. So that was the first time I suppose I put on an Irish kit and represented my country. It's like extremely proud moment.
And now we're aiming to get to Tokyo 2020.
So obviously it's a different sport. I switched to triathlon. So it was kind of during that year I started a bit of running just to keep fit for football. And as I said at the start, I work full time. So I work with Vodafone, and as you know, Anne O'Leary there in Vodafone is a huge advocate of triathlon. And at the time, I thought triathlon was absolutely mental. So I couldn't swim at the time, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to give this sport a try. But one of the girls I was running with said, I think she was being coached by Eamon at the time, and mentioned that there was a paratriathlon talent ID day being held by Triathlon Ireland and headed up by Eamon, and basically just said for me to come along and give it a go. And I just went along. At the time, obviously, as I said, I couldn't swim, and I said that to Eamon. I said, I have no interest in triathlon, but I want to improve my running. And he was completely open and welcoming, and just said join in the group. And I suppose as the sessions went on, Eamon actually teamed me up with his brother Dave as a guide, because I was looking for a guide at the time. And Dave once again floated the idea of triathlon to me, and basically said, okay, I said I can't swim, and he's like, okay, I'll teach you.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history, yeah.
So I'm going to bring Dave in here now for a minute, because Dave, you've been in the sports triathlon since 1984. That's probably longer than many of my listeners will have been doing the sports triathlon, because in Ireland it's still a relatively new-ish sport. Like 1984, I mean, Ironman's only 40 years old in, 2018. You must have seen a huge change in the sports triathlon across the country or across the world since you took it up back those years
massively,
ago.
Massively. Like, I remember when we started, there was no access to information because there was no internet. There were no mobile phones. The only way you found out about events were if you happened to see them on the TV, which the Ironman used to be televised once a year. The half Ironman that was held in Sligo every year, like, that was the mecca of triathlons in Ireland back then. That was televised every Christmas. If you were involved in triathlons, that's what you watched.
How did you get involved in the sport back in 1984?
Through watching that on the TV at Christmas with my brother-in-law, who was a cyclist. And at the time, I was smoking 80 a day. I was drinking. I was lapping her up, living life to the full, as I thought. And my brother-in-law says to me, he says, "Oh, you wouldn't be able for that?" And I says, "Sure, that doesn't look too hard." And he says, "I bet you a tenner you wouldn't be able to do a triathlon." £10 was put down on the table, and the two of us. He was a cyclist with Dublin Wheelers at a good level. He rode to Junior Ross, and he was well into training. He knew about cycling. He says to me, he says, "Look, I have a second bike there of all the cycling kit. I can give you that." He says, "There's a triathlon on." So we did a bit of research, and the first triathlon of the season was on in Finglas, in the pool in Finglas. So we decided to do a bit of training. We joined the Irish Triathlon Association. That was their first year of being set up. We joined them. We went along to the Finglas Triathlon, and that was the first triathlon I did. It was a sprint event it was in May. So it was swim in the pool. The cycle went out the North Road, and the run was out around Finglas. In doing that, I met some great people, and some people who sadly aren't with us. The mother of triathlons, Anne Carney, was one of my mentors. another chap, Derek Murphy, who is still involved in sport at his own level, but doesn't compete anymore. And Derek did every discipline of triathlons there is all over the world. And he introduced us to hill running, mountain running as a form of training. I finished last in my first triathlon, did a breaststroke for the whole swim, came back, completely changed all my kit, put on a full set of cycling kit, and back then the kit was woolen. So, like, to get that on you was a challenge in itself. There was no triathlon kit, there was no tri-suits, there was none of that. Like, that hadn't come yet. Then I came back off the bike, took off all the cycling kit in the transition, in me nude, and put on running kit. Like, and that's what everyone did. Everyone did that.
There was no separate changing tents for nudity or penalties.
None of that. Absolutely.
Down below
None of that.
bone.
You put a towel around yourself and you changed standing in the car park in the swimming pool and things.
What was your longest transition time, Dave?
Some of the transitions, as you got a bit quicker, now that was probably my slowest ever, because I changed the full kit. I changed out of the swimming gear into the full cycling gear, and to get the woolen cycling gear onto you when you're all wet you had to be a contortionist. Like, it was everyone. It wasn't just me. It was everyone. And that's like back then. And I remember, like, we joined as we progressed. There was no triathlon clubs, so we joined a swimming club to get better at swimming, a running club to get better at running, Liffey Valley Running Club. We joined. Jim Davis was our coach there, and I remember going to the running club and him saying to us, "Oh, you want to give up them old triathlons? They're, like, you need to be a runner." But every club, that's the way they approached it. Like, nobody embraced triathlons. They all just wanted you as an individual, either to swim, to cycle, or to run. Triathlons was only evolving. People were going, they're nutters. But you arrive at a race and there'd be 30 people, but it was like a family. And you went around the country doing the races around the circuit back then, and everyone knew everyone. And friendships were struck up that are still to this day still live. Like, I have friends in Newry who came down to live with us in Ringsend, and we went to live with them in Belfast, because they had access to the only 50-metre pool in Ireland. And we used to go up there and train to be better swimmers. And they would come down and stay with us in Dublin to be better cyclists.
I think there's a show on the history of triathlon forming in my head with some of the triathlon, I suppose, legends really of Ireland, which we might talk about again. But today I really want to focus on Donnacha. So I want to bring it back, Dave, to how you ended up becoming a guide and getting involved in the paratri side of things. We might bring Eamon in a minute to talk about paratriathlon as a whole in terms of getting people into the sport. But I want to talk about you and Donnacha as a pair. And I know there's a number of different guides that have raced and will race with Donnacha. But how did you get involved in that whole side of the sport of triathlon?
So I had just finished 4 years of study. I went back and did a degree in horticulture in the Botanic Gardens. I was kind of just coming out of that study time, and I was kind of going, what am I going to do now? Because all my life I had dipped in and out of triathlons. And I think that's one of the reasons I stayed so injury-free. Just coming to the end of my studies, I was saying, now what am I going to do? I've all this time now to fail. And so Eamon knew where I was at coming out of the studies, and he says, I'll nab this fella now, which is what he did. And he rang me up and he says, I have this guy and he's looking to do triathlons. And you know the way you said you wanted to do something, and I says, yeah. He says, well, maybe you arrange a meeting with this chap. His name is Donnacha. And I says, right, great stuff. So Donnacha rang me up. How are you, Dave? Yeah, Eamon gave me your number, grand job. Can we have a meeting? And I says, yeah, sure, great. So we arranged to meet in coffee shop in Ball's Bridge. I arrives up and I'm sitting there waiting on this guy to arrive. I was signing this fella and I said, right, that's it, I'm out of here. So I stood up to go out of the coffee shop and I'm walking out to the door and I open the door of the coffee shop and this guy comes along with a guide dog and a stick. And I said, hold on there, mate, I'll get that door for you. Open the door and he goes, you're Dave, are you? And I goes, yeah, I'm Dave. And there was a moment of silence where he knew I was going, how is this going to work? Because I didn't know he was blind when I was coming to meet him. I didn't know how bad his visual impairment was. And I was just, how is this going to work?
And what did you think when you met Dave first, Donnacha? Did you think, geez, this lad's doing a runner before he even met me?
Well, actually, that's the first time I've heard that, actually.
It's all coming out now.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, so I suppose, like, Dave is dead right there when he said we didn't know how it was going to work, to be honest. Like, so he sat down and we just went through, okay, what can you do swim, bike and run-wise? And at the time, like, I was an okay runner. I didn't have a tandem and I couldn't swim. So we're going to like, what's this going to be like? We didn't really know anything about paratriathlon, the tethering systems, what worked, what didn't work. I'd never swam open water. And in fairness to Dave, like he took it all in his stride. Like it didn't faze him whatsoever. Like Joey just said, no problem, we'll work through this and we'll find some way of getting this all together. Like, and this was probably maybe 2016, late 2016.
It was September.
January 2017, we done our first multi-sport race, and that was Nice Duathlon out in Punchestown. So done really well. Like I finished second in my age category that day. So
you've gone from zero to hero, really. I mean, what was your swim time when you started off? Somebody told me it was around 40 minutes, but now you're rocking out like 15, 16 minutes. 17
yeah. Like when I say I couldn't swim back then, like I mean I couldn't swim. Like I could do maybe 3 or 4 strokes in the pool and I'd have to stop. I couldn't breathe.
So for most of us, Donnacha, that have come to triathlon at an older age, you know, so there's a lot of athletes out there that are doing their first race when they're in their late 30s, 40s, whatever their reason. Swimming is one of the biggest barriers, and there's a huge, massive fear of the water amongst people who haven't learned to swim as a child.
Yeah.
But you had the double issue of being visually impaired, not able to swim, and probably had to be tethered to somebody in the pool. How do you go and get over all of that and become as good as you are in terms of your swimming?
Yeah, it's
great difficulty.
Yeah, it was a lot of hours in the water, to be honest. Like I know when I started swimming, it was a case of just getting used of being in the water on my own, and then I slowly progressed to swimming one linked or a half a linked, then one linked, and then just build it up and up. And like the biggest thing is it is your mind, because your mind, like you do, and triathletes in particular have a tendency to overthink things and say, oh, I'm not doing this right. And like it's one thing one of my coaches said to me is just keep everything simple. And I actually spoke to another visually impaired athlete who had a similar background to me, had no swimming background, and learned to swim. He just gave me a few tips in terms of what to do, and it just took time. It took a lot of time, a lot of patience. There was a few tantrums thrown, I'm sure.
That was by Dave, was it?
Both of us, I'd say.
No, not so much tantrums, but
frustration. Yeah,
because like we have never fallen out.
No.
Ever. In all our time together, we have never had. Only one time I came very close to just blowing a fuse, and that was our first ever triathlon swim. I remember we had done the swim in the pool. Now we were struggling to do the distance, 750 metres. We were struggling to do the distance, but we were doing it, stopping, going, stopping, going. And our system was Donnachas would hold my left shoulder or my right shoulder. We'd tread water and then we'd go again. So that, you know, he'd get his breathing right, and then he'd put the head down, do another 5 or 6 strokes, stop, hold my shoulder again, and do the same again. In our first ever triathlon, that was the closest I came to just saying, here, enough of this, right? Because we had put so much time into trying to, you know, develop a bit of swimming, a bit of a stroke, and to get through the 750. And we knew that when we got on the bike, that we would actually be racing. And once we got in the run, there was nobody to race against us, because we were good runners. Like, we were able to race. And in that situation where we were in the swim, I remember the nervousness of him at the start. And I said to myself, this fella's not going to do this. He's going to say, no, and I can't do this. And he nearly did, till I said, right, if you don't do this, I am not going to go any further. And I screamed at him in the water, in the barrel in Carlo. I screamed at him in the water. When the hooter went off, I said, right, 3, 2, 1, go. And he had a panic attack. He started hyperventilating in the water, and he was holding on to me, and I kept saying, hold me shoulder. And he did that. I said, right, 3, 2, 1. And I was trying to fire him up to put the head down, but he just couldn't get the breathing to just, but I think it was the whole anxiety of the water, the crowd, the moment of the race. That was the defining moment in his triathlon career, because he got over the anxiety of being afraid of the water. And I don't know how he did it. And I don't know how he does it now even. But I know that when we are swimming together in open water, he's in his own element, because I find it's the place where, even without a tether, we have swam lots of times without tether, and I would just swim along beside DC, as I call him. I'd swim along beside him and I'd bump off him just to let him know I'm there, or he'd bump off me. But when he's swimming, he can swim and swim and swim, and I experienced that when we did the Liffey swim. He was the first visually impaired athlete to swim in the Liffey. I remember coming to the finish at the Liffey swim, and we were swimming down the Liffey, and it's a big pontoon in the middle of the Liffey that you swim through to finish, and then you get out of the water. But I remember having to actually hold him back and say, we're finished.
Yeah, like I just keep swimming until I get a tap on the head to stop.
It's not an irrational fear that you had getting into the water in the barrel.
No.
Because a lot of people...
Yeah, a lot of people feel that.
And it's the adrenaline rush of the whole race. I'm sure, Mark, you've experienced it in many of your races, that
I've
adrenaline
had
rush.
two panic attacks in Ironman swims. I respect this guy, Donnacha, like, you know, I can see, he can't see, and you have the panic attack, and you've overcome it. So your listeners can overcome it. All in the mind, as Donnacha said.
So talk to me then, Donnacha, about your training in general. How does it work? Do you train all the time with a guide? So are your guides always with you regardless of what you're doing in terms of training, or how does it work?
I suppose at the moment, like, I'm training maybe 16 to 18 hours a week. Kind of consists of probably between 5 and 6 swims, 5 runs, 3 bikes, and strength and conditioning then on top of that. To be honest, the majority of my sessions I actually do on my own. So there are key sessions during the week that I try to do with a guide. My speed sessions and running, or my tempo runs. Similarly on the bike, my long spins on the bike, 3 or 4 hour spins, I do outdoors on the tandem. And then obviously I swim my swim club in Markovic and do some sessions in UCD as well. A lot of the easier stuff and aerobic stuff I just do on the turbo on my own or on the treadmill. On a practical level,
and this might be more to do with my ignorance around your own situation, but how do you get around? I know you have air when you have the stick, but How do you get around picking up the right size weights, setting your turbo at the right level for when you're on your own and doing stuff on a practical level? Because I'll never, touch wood, I will never become visually impaired, but I'll never really understand what it is like day to day to do what you do.
To be honest, like for me, technology is pretty much key. Like for all my runs, I have an Apple Watch, and that actually speaks to me. So like anything, so when whatever I touch on the screen, it reads back to me. So if I'm doing a session on the treadmill or intervals on the treadmill, it'll read back what pace I'm running at, what distance I've covered. Similarly on the turbo, so I have it's a Wahoo Kicker Turbo. There's an app for the iPhone that connects to, so I can control everything to do with the turbo on the iPhone app. So that'll read back to me my power output. I can change the resistance or set the wattage to a certain level, so I know exactly what watts I need to do or what heart rate I need to hit.
Do you prefer working off watts or heart rate?
At the moment I'm working, well, I kind of use them both in tandem with each other. So running wise, at the moment I'm doing everything on heart rate. On the turbo I do everything by power, but I do keep an eye on my heart rate as well, just to make sure that I'm in the right zone, or that I'm not too tired from that week's training and maybe need to back it off a little bit. So yeah, like I always keep an eye on heart rate, but from a cycling point of view, I just focus on power.
How much trust do you have to place in the people around you to help you in terms of your triathlon performance, like with Dave or Brian McChrystal or Stephen Teeling? That relationship, it has to be very strong, doesn't it?
Yeah, like and like that really does come down to the amount you train together. In a sprint race scenario, it's 1 hour of racing hard, eyeballs out, like, so there's not a whole amount of time to communicate or explain things that's going on. You really need to get that communication down to a T in your training session, so you know exactly, you can almost tell by touch or whatever that Brian would know if I'm overexerting myself, or similarly, or like knows what effort I'm putting out on the bike. We do a lot of training together just to get in sync with each other, know each other, know when we're tired, know when we're able to push it that bit harder. So it's all down to practice really, and just spending as much time together as you can, and just build that relationship and build that bit of a rapport between each other.
Eamon, I want to bring you in here quickly just on the whole guide side of things and the paratri side of things, because I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who have the ability to be a guide. They have the power, the strength, the empathy, and they might be interested in getting involved in the paratri scene here in Ireland. So how does somebody get involved in it, or what are the qualities that you'd look for? Just to give you
a little bit of background on it, we started the program in 2014. Chris Kitchen, he was a CEO and still is CEO. He gave us the opportunity to develop this program. Triathlon Ireland, as a nation or organisation of Ireland, is fantastic. They're very open and allows us to run with most things. So just in coming back to your question regarding guides, it's important that we get the right team. Okay, it has to fit. I had young Chris Minton on the bike last week there at the NACE Triathlon Championships, Para Championships, and I had him on the front first. And he went, oh my God, I'm not getting on that bike ever again. And I said, look, with a bit of help, a bit of support, you can. So it just goes to show you, like, regarding guides, it has to be the perfect fit. Ideally, if you look at 2016, we brought the first female, Catherine Walsh, to Rio. Catherine's guide was Fran Meehan, and both of them were superb, and the gold medalists in the Para Games. We look for performance, we measure watts, and usually everybody looks at watts, and we also look at the power to weight, relevant to the individual who they are guiding. You couldn't imagine Donnachas dragging Brian McChrystal around on the bike, vice versa.
Oh, I could imagine that, alright. Pocket rocket.
Yeah. Well, again, that's, what we're looking at in the program is to try and find the perfect guide for Donnacha. At the moment, as you rightly said earlier on, there is a series of 4 or 5 guys looking for that one slot. Now, we won't make that decision until we, pretty much May or June, once we get a selection for Donnachas. So ideally, from our point of view, it's about who is the better of that, which fits. And that's only one measure, the team, the fit. The second one would be, of course, the ability to swim or cycle or run. Who is the faster, or can they hold Donnachas' run pace?
What is your run pace?
At the moment for 5k, my 5k PB would be 17:30.
That's fairly rapid.
Yeah.
Ideally, from our point of view, it's about somebody having a percentage greater than that. Different percentages for different disciplines. And ideally, the guide can only swim as good as the athlete. Okay. The percentage-wise from a performance on the sprint distance is 51% is the bike, and that's the greater. So ideally, when we look at weighting it, we look predominantly on who are the stronger of the bikers. Then we look at, can they maintain that athlete's performance on the swim, and can they then put in a performance greater than the athlete, and can they hold his run pace on the course.
So where are we now with the qualification for Tokyo? Is ranked 24th, is it, at the moment?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, 24th in the world, 20th on the Paralympic selection ranking. It's difficult. It's not just difficult, they usually pick the top 10 in the world, top 9, and then you get nominated. The last slot is usually a bipartite slot. So ideally what we're looking at is to show representation to the ITU or the International Federation, is that we can be people. Paratriathlon is only a young sport, and that in itself is a hindrance to us. We would have been liking to be in it earlier, but ideally from our point of view we aren't, so we deal with what we have. And I have to take my hat off to any athlete with a disability, especially Donnachas, who has the passion and the drive to want to go to the games. And when we look at Donnachas, he's ranked 20th in the Paralympic rankings, but when we measure him up against other athletes, he's well able.
So Donnachas, you were 6th in the Paratri World Championships, was the test event for Tokyo, wasn't that right?
Yeah.
A cancelled swim and became
a
triathlon. If it had been the true event, there was no cancelled swim, do you think you would have ranked higher?
It's impossible to say really. It really came down to the weather conditions on the day. Tokyo heat, you really need to be out there in it to experience what it was like. It was so hot, about 30-degree heat, but the humidity was around 95%. Even doing a 5k run, never mind, I suppose an extra 2.5k run at the start, on top of that really just saps the strength in your legs. So I think maybe getting in the water might have been a little bit refreshing, I think from that point, it's impossible to say really how we would have performed if it was a swim. We've done subsequent races, obviously, where it has been the full triathlon, and the swim, it isn't a debilitating factor whatsoever in terms of us competing. I think we're really well up there in terms of the top athletes in the world, and I know we have a lot more to prove this year as well. So
how do you train for the heat then, Donnacha? Because that's going to affect an awful lot of athletes across the sports that Ireland will send. How do you factor that into your training or your preparation for Tokyo?
Yeah, so we'd be looking to do some more weather training before just heading abroad, but for here locally. So on the build up to Tokyo, I was doing some sessions in the sauna after a workout. So it was primarily a swim, obviously. So I go and do a swim workout and then just get out of the water and go straight into the sauna and just sit there for 30 minutes and just let the heat bake me, basically. And it's just about trying to get your body to adapt to that just intense heat. And that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot you can do apart from that, than being out there and being in situ before the race itself and just getting used to the weather conditions.
You mentioned earlier that you're training around 16 hours a week, plus you have a full-time job with Vodafone. How do you balance your tri life, your work life, and I suppose getting in the recovery that's needed between all of the sessions and getting some time just for Donnacha to chill with Aero? Or is there any of that at all?
Yeah, there is. Like, in fairness, work have been hugely supportive to me. And like, obviously I'm very grateful for that. Like, they know where I'm at the moment and what I'm trying to achieve. So they've been very flexible in terms of just allowing me to train in the mornings if that's a swim or a run session, and then come into work and do my day's work up until 5 o'clock in the evening. As well as that, like in Vodafone, it's great because there's a huge emphasis as well on kind of work-life balance and well-being, and like there's a full gym and work. Everyone's into sport, so it's quite easy for me to get training sessions in at lunchtime as well if I need to do that. And I think all the rest of it just really comes down to, it's just preparation. Like, you just have to be as prepared as possible for your week. So you just need to plan out what sessions you're doing, prepare your food for the week, ensure that you have the right food for recovery post, particularly your harder sessions, so your speed work and your tempo work, and just make sure that you have the, I suppose, nutrition you need to take straight away after that session before you can get something more substantial into you and get your body ready for whatever the second session is for that day. So I usually kind of balance it off in terms of, I have a hard session in the morning, easy session in the evening, or vice versa. So obviously you'd never do 2 hard sessions on the one day. In terms of your sleep, do you sleep much, or are you visualizing all the time getting to that start line in Tokyo? Yeah, it's like sleep is hugely important for I suppose that recovery and making sure your body is refreshed for the next day. So I put a lot of emphasis on sleep and getting a good night's sleep. So like, I just switch the phone off before I go to bed, make sure that there's no disturbances like that. And just when you're talking about visualizing for Tokyo, no, I don't let that get into my head whatsoever. Like I just focus on one race at a time and just focus on the training leading into that race and make sure that I'm in as good a shape as possible and ready to perform for that race. So like my next race now is it's a paratriathlon World Cup in Abu Dhabi. So just purely to focus on now is just trying to get myself race ready for that event and get a good result. Do you feel under pressure to perform, to come home and as the winner of the race, or to improve your rankings? You know, how do you deal with the pressure? We know that in the Barrow a couple of years ago with the swim, have you come up with things that help you to prepare so that you're not anxious or you're not worried, or you know, how do you deal with the pressure that you've all these wonderful people around you supporting you and not letting them down and not letting yourself down? Yeah, like there's always a little bit of pressure going into a race, and I think it's a good thing as well, because it kind of helps you to focus and just make sure that you're not going to miss any sessions leading into a race. But like really what I try to do is, I suppose, the week leading into a race when I'm on a taper is just look back at my past 6-7 weeks of training and try and get an understanding, okay, where I'm at fitness wise, what I've been doing, and I put just realistic expectations on myself going into a race. Like the potential there is obviously to win a race, but I don't put that pressure on myself going into a race. I just look at my past training, what I've been doing, and just know that when I go out there to race that I'm giving it 100% and leaving everything out there on the course. And I think it doesn't just apply to elite racing or anything like that. Like that, it's the same for everyone. I think no matter what you're doing training wise, if you give it 100% out there on the day and leave everything out on the course, you can't be disappointed when you finish, no matter where you finish on the day. I read something there that you mentioned that if you believe in yourself, others will believe in you too. I think that's hugely important with what you're trying to do, that you very much believe in your ability and in your sport and what you're trying to do. You must be incredibly proud of what you've done.
where you've come from when you think back to being a kid, going through your cancer treatment and becoming visually impaired, and where you are now. Like, you're on the cusp of representing your country in a sport that you took up very recently and are about to go to the biggest sporting event in the world.
Yeah, when you put it like that, I suppose I'm very bad for that in terms of self-reflecting back on where I've come from. Like, I'm always kind of looking forward to the next race and how I can improve. But when I actually sit back and take stock and look at where I came from, and I think it's just a testament really to just hard work and just putting in the hours. And I think that's possible for anyone. Like, if you look at 3 years ago, I couldn't swim. Barely do an open water swim in a race, to now
World Cup
medals. getting medals at an international level. So I think it should be very encouraging for anyone out there. Like, it's I think if you surround yourself obviously with the right people. Like, I have a great team involved in the paratriathlon program, and that's full credit to Eamon and the work he's doing. Not just for me, but for paratriathlon in general in Ireland. He's a super team there, from running coaches, cycling coaches, strength and conditioning, a nutritionist on board.
Family.
Yeah, it is.
So
yeah,
I think
yeah.
something that's very special about the triathlon community as well is that it all kind of comes together. That we've got somebody who is aiming to be at the top of his game. I know you've been the national champion on 2 occasions. You were the Paratriathlete of the Year. Huge accolades for you to achieve. And I imagine the support of sponsors is very important as well. And that's where Mark O'Dwyer comes in, and the triathlete himself must be very important to have him in your corner as well, because he understands the sport.
Yeah, and it's great to have the likes of Big Red Cloud backing me. I also have HLB Sheehan Quinn as a sponsor, and Kingspan as well, and like it's very humbling to have companies of that kind of caliber backing me and believing in me and just interested in my story. I think it's fantastic, and if it's something that can promote para sport and sport in general and what that can do for people, I think that's all the better,
Mark, for the likes of yourself, with your own company and your own background in sport, rugby being your first sport and triathlon your second, how important is it for you to get involved with the likes of Donnacha and support his journey to Tokyo and indeed his endeavours as an athlete in general? Yeah,
I guess all your listeners out there all have kind of set goals, whether it's just to complete a sprint triathlon, an Olympic triathlon, do a half Ironman, do a full Ironman, and everybody has a bigger goal than what they set out to be. I'm one of them. I'd like to get to the World Championships. May not get there. So I then look at Donnacha. You got to love the guy. You got to respect the guy. I didn't know he had the panic attacks, and I can relate to that because I had the panic attacks, as I said earlier on. And he's blind, and he's just doing it, and he's going to get to the Olympics. And you ask about does he feel the pressure? I have him on a performance-related incentive as well as throwing a chunk of money at him. So he gets a certain amount first, second and third. So he has that there. It's a little incentive, but being a businessman, I like to put a little bit out there. So I'm just delighted to give back in some way. And when you can support somebody who is as dedicated as Donnacha at this sport, it's just a pleasure for me to sit back and watch. And I'm really humbled to be in the company of everybody here and be included in this podcast, because I'm having a great old laugh here. It's great.
But again, it's the triathlon family.
Yeah.
Correct.
Mark,
yeah.
You know what I mean? You know when you started in triathlons, you were kind of you arrived to your first race and you're kind of looking in the transition. You wheel your bike in and you're going, what do I do here?
Well, actually, I have a funny story like you about your first race. I decided to do a relay first to start off, and being competitive, I got a really good swimmer, and I got the national under-25 cycling champion as my cyclist. So
why doesn't that surprise me?
So the swimmer came out in 18th position, and the cyclist put me onto the 10k run in first position. And 5k into 10k run, this guy shouts at me, "Hey Mark, I'm coming to get you!" And I look around, it's Eamon Coughlin. And he just waves his hand like he did in the Olympics, going past me. And he told me afterwards, he saw me warming up in the car park, thought I looked like a bit of a challenge, found out what my name was, and said he'd sprint past me to kill my spirit. And I thought, well, you know what? It did. So coming second to an Olympic champion is not a bad thing.
Here's another story for
Yeah,
another day.
you know what I mean? It's the whole triathlon community.
Oh yeah, it's
Kind
just
of
great.
everyone
And you like to
comes-
give back because you've been given too, and it's unfair to be selfish. And that's what triathletes do. They do give back to their
And I think that's why I get so much from guiding, is that when I started, like, Anne Carney was my mentor, and she was like your mother. She was everyone's mother. You know, she inspired everyone, you know. I mean, she was such a great athlete herself. Like, I remember her children when they were, 5 and 6, and they were into swimming, and they used to come along to the races. But Anne was there, and no matter what questions they had, what they eat, because there was no internet, there was nobody to kind of show you the way, except that, you went outside to the separate entities of swimming, cycling and running. There was no club, but triathletes came together as a family. And I think triathlon ensues that as a family now. And people give back who have been involved, like me, from the start. And I love guiding. I would race with Donnacha every day of the week if I could.
That's a real endorsement of Donnacha as well as an athlete, I think, isn't it?
But I mean, as he said, you need somebody to gel with. From our first run together, he nearly killed me, he did. We have a corner called after me when we run in the Phoenix Park. He knocked me out in our first run together.
Was it on purpose?
Gone again, my fault. Going around the corner, not used to guiding. The tether went long. He caught my foot. I landed on my head, stood up, and I was dazed. And all these people running by us in a 5k race, the Tom Brennan, isn't it? Tom Brennan Memorial race going by Liffey Valley on New Year's Day. And on that corner, that's my corner where he tripped me up. When we're doing our long runs, I would say, we're just coming to Tilly Corner now. And he'd laugh still to this day.
Is there a plaque in the corner?
I think we're going to put a statue up there of him falling sometime. Yeah. But like he's right there. Like I know we don't get to race as often as we did. But obviously, like we still train together, and like I don't see Dave as just a guide. Like he's a friend as well, and it's the same with my other guides. Like they're a lot more than just someone to race with, and I think that's really important, building that kind of relationship with the guide as well.
I think that's the triathlon family.
Yeah.
Mark, you probably got that when you started.
That's why I'm giving back.
Yeah, like, and even now today, like when you go to a race, like there's never any animosity. There's a bit of
banter, there's a bit of inter-club kind of competition, but it's actually what I think is very special about the sports triathlon is, you might come from a club background in terms of like a team sport background, but if you haven't had that opportunity as a kid to play in a club sport, you've never really understood what it's like, and then you come into triathlon, and while it's an individual sport, there's such a great spirit with all of the tri clubs, and I think that's hugely important, and we see lots and lots more people getting involved in it. I want to just chat quickly. Eamon, Pete, Mark and Connor on the Art O'Neill challenge.
In fairness, it wasn't my idea now. So, no, in fairness to the guys, they decided to, I think they were looking for a challenge to do anyway. And they settled on this Art O'Neill challenge. I'd never heard of it before now, to be fair, until I looked into it. And I thought they were nuts, to be honest, doing it. But in fairness to them, they decided to run it and help raise funds, obviously, for my own aims to qualify for Tokyo and for the Wicklow Mountain Rescue as well, which was massive of them, really. So I was just there to support them on the night when they set out, and then the next morning when they arrived in the middle of the Wicklow Mountains at the finish line. So that was an absolutely massive event.
What's been the highlight of your sporting career to date?
There's probably a lot now. Really, for me, I think it's just, representing your country, especially the first time I got to to wear an Irish kit, and I think it was that time in Romania when I captained the Irish football team in the European qualifiers. Definitely for me, like when I lost my sight first, like that was something I don't think I would have ever imagined in my life. Representing your country internationally, and like it was a huge honour to do that. Obviously since then there's been probably a few other highlights. Definitely doing the Liffey swim was another thing I thought wasn't possible, and something that I'd never ever do, to be honest. And obviously my first triathlon as well was a big moment.
So if there's anybody listening to the show now and they're sitting there thinking, geez, I could never do X, Y or Z, what would your advice be to them?
I really think it's like if you're going to do something that you think is impossible, you're going to go through hard times. Like for me, learning to swim, it was a slog. It really was a slog. And I think when you get through the difficult moments and get to the other side, eventually something will just click, and it's just becomes easy all of a sudden, and you're kind of thinking to yourself, what just happened there? And I really think it's all down to your mindset, your focus, and obviously your determination to try and get something done and just get through the training. And yeah, like I just really think that's it. Just when the going gets tough, just slog it out and keep going, and eventually you get there.
Get the right people around you too.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's important.
Having that group around you to support you as well was absolutely massive for me, and definitely in terms of the amount of people that I've had in terms of guides, coaches, even within the paratriathlon now as well, like the other athletes involved, like each athlete, they're all absolutely amazing. Like they all have their own story, they all have their own difficulties, but they just get on with it. Like you never, at our training sessions, you never hear anyone complaining or giving out or anything like that. They just keep the head down and train, and I think that's hugely inspirational for me, like as well.
Thank you so much for coming in to record the show today. Hugely inspiring. I wish you the very best of luck in Tokyo. I have no doubt you will get there and you will come home and have done Ireland very, very proud. I want to say a huge thank you to Eamon for coordinating the interview, to Dave for taking time out from his schedule to come in, and Mark from Big Red Cloud for hosting us here today. Thank you so much for hosting us here in your offices in Dublin. I look forward to seeing you on the start line in Tokyo, Donnacha McCarthy.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you are enjoying the show, please pop a review on Apple Podcasts or on the Facebook page, Try Talking Sport. I love hearing your feedback on the interviews. If you want to get in touch, pop an email to trytalkingsport@gmail.com. That's try with an I, not a Y. And don't forget to complete our survey on www.trytalkingsport.com for the chance to win one of our Bobble beanie hats. Until next time, stay safe, happy training, and don't forget to set those goals.